I should have been nervous about coming back here, this house, this family, but in truth, the trembling in my hands felt more like anger than fear. 11 years is a long time to be away from anyone, let alone people who share your blood. 11 years is also long enough to realize how deeply your trust was broken. But here I was anyway, stepping onto the circular driveway of my parents' estate, invitation in hand, glaring up at the white pillars framing that wide front door. My name wasn't on the thick, embossed envelope that found its way to my mailbox 3 weeks ago. I recognized the handwriting instantly as belonging to my brother-in-law, not my sister. That detail alone told me more than any phone call or letter could have. My name is Laurel Price, and I was effectively erased from my own family, abandoned without a single explanation or goodbye, over a decade ago. Tonight, I was about to walk back into their world for the first time since it happened. The gathering was meant to celebrate my younger sister, Rosalie, who turned 30 a week ago and was apparently throwing herself a lavish party. Everyone in this town believed Rosalie to be a star, a visionary, a pioneer in medical technology, or so they said. My parents fed that narrative, painting her as the rightful genius in the family. But what the onlookers never realized, what Rosalie and my parents carefully hid, was that the invention at the center of Rosalie's fame was originally mine. I had nurtured the concept through years of work, only to watch them siphon off my research, my college fund, and even my place in the family. They said I walked away, that I couldn't handle the stress, or was too fragile for serious academic work, but the truth was simpler. They locked the door behind me, and I never had the key. So here I was, after all these years, returning to a place I once called home. The same crunch of gravel underfoot made my chest tighten with memories, some good, mostly painful. I couldn't escape the sensation that I was trespassing on my own childhood. The invitation might as well have been a ghost beckoning me inside. My coat, black, cut just above the knee, felt too warm for the late summer evening, but I kept it on anyway, a kind of armor. In my left hand, I clutched the invitation. In my right, I had my phone, still debating if I wanted to be here badly enough to cross the threshold. But I told myself this was bigger than me now. The illusions needed shattering, and if I didn't do it, nobody ever would. When I finally summoned the courage to climb the brick steps, I noticed how little the exterior of the house had changed. The original paint job was refreshingly intact, right down to the pastel shutters and the trailing ivy, which clung to the old stone walls like a well-tended secret. A single tall boxwood shrub, carefully trimmed into a spiral, stood guard on each side of the entrance. The air was sweet with the scent of clipped hedges and freshly watered flowers. On any other day, this might have been beautiful, but I felt only dread. My parents had always loved showing off their impeccably landscaped property. Tonight, that old obsession was on full display, the walkway lined with real lanterns, flickering with golden light, an image straight out of a high society magazine spread. I reached the door and paused, momentarily paralyzed by the memory of being turned away from this place. My father's face was all I could see, glowering as he dropped my suitcase on the porch and shut the door behind him, refusing to let me in. With a deep breath, I rang the bell, half expecting the door to open on some butler or staff member. Instead, Trevor Russo, my brother-in-law, and the real reason I was here, answered. Trevor was the only person in the family circle who had ever shown me genuine kindness. He extended his arms, wrapping me in a quick, firm embrace, as if we were old friends catching up after months, not strangers reuniting after more than a decade. "Laurel, I'm really glad you came," he said, looking me directly in the eye. He looked the same, short, neatly combed hair that was beginning to gray at the temples, slightly rumpled tie. The kind of man who'd give you the shirt off his back if you asked. I had always wondered how someone so genuine could be married to my sister, but that's life's puzzle, I suppose. "I appreciate the invite," I said, swallowing hard. It must have taken courage, with everything that's happened. He gave me a gentle smile, then stepped aside to let me in. Beyond the front foyer, I could see the swaying forms of about 100 guests. Music, a low hum of conversation, the clink of silverware against glasses. "I'll be around all night if you need anything," Trevor said, and then he melted back into the crowd with a polite nod, leaving me at the threshold of the main hall. I resisted the urge to run. Instead, I squared my shoulders and moved forward. The main living space glowed with elaborate chandeliers, each crystal reflecting an explosion of tiny rainbows on the polished marble floor. Expensive area rugs boasted intricate patterns. On the far side, a string quartet played softly in a corner, while waitstaff in crisp attire circulated with trays of champagne flutes. I could practically taste the money in the air. No more than 30 seconds passed before I spotted my mother, June Price, by the grand piano, entertaining guests with her customary blend of aloof politeness and forced sweetness. She wore a sleek off-white cocktail dress that accentuated her slender figure. Her hair, once dark like mine, was now dyed a stylish silver blonde, coiffed in a neat updo that suggested she had an army of stylists for even a small event. If she recognized me right away, she hit it well. In fact, her gaze flickered past me, as though scanning the faces of the crowd behind me, and she offered a brief, brittle smile. "Oh, Trevor mentioned he was bringing an associate," she said vaguely, turning to the two physicians at her elbow. "She's done some remarkable work with, was it technology, dear?" She didn't speak my name. She didn't say my daughter. She made no move to close the distance or embrace me. To anyone listening, I was just a random +1. I offered a polite nod, a part of me relieved to avoid the confrontation, another part of me stinging at the emptiness of her acknowledgement. "Yes," I managed. "I work in neural interfaces and cognitive assessment tools." The line was standard, professional, practiced. I'd had a decade to refine my explanation for strangers, and apparently for my own mother too. The two doctors asked me a few polite questions, but June swiftly steered the conversation back to Rosalie. Always back to her. I took that as my cue to slip away, which I did without further fanfare, weaving through people who looked vaguely familiar but much older than I remembered. Finally, I spotted Patrick Price, my father, standing near the ornate fireplace. While my mother disguised her distrust behind courtesy, my father made no such attempt. His frown lines were harsh, his posture stiff, a whiskey glass balanced with perfect stillness in his right hand. As our gazes met across the room, I saw an unmistakable glower. It said, "You'd better not make a scene." I gave him the smallest nod and veered off to the nearest open bar, letting a cautious distance remain between us. The bartender, a young woman in a formal vest, asked what I'd like. "Just sparkling water," I replied. "Lime if you have it." Better to keep my wits about me. From that vantage point, sipping my water, I could study the rest of the attendees. Some were old colleagues of my father's, established surgeons and medical directors. Others must have been from Rosalie's circles, fellow researchers, corporate sponsors, starry-eyed investors. There, on a giant screen at the far end of the room, was a slideshow looping through childhood photos of Rosalie. In one, she was a toddler, grinning with sticky hands. In another, a proud high school graduate. Then flashed images of her receiving some prestigious medical award, looking professional in a lab coat. A wave of nausea hit me when I saw an old family portrait, taken on the front porch of this very house. In the original photo, I had stood next to Rosalie, but in the version on that screen, the image was clearly cropped. All that was left of me was a fraction of an arm near Rosalie's shoulder. I recognized the pattern of my blouse. That was all that remained of my existence in that family memory. Nearby, I heard the soft hush of speculation. Is that woman from NeuroSentinel? She looks so familiar. Wait, the one who developed that advanced neural sensor? I kept my face neutral. NeuroSentinel was my startup. The design was an evolution of technology I'd begun working on in college, my tech. The same tech Rosalie had once claimed to develop from scratch. I inhaled slowly, letting the moment pass. The confrontation I needed would come, but not yet. Let them chatter, let them wonder. I had more pressing matters on my mind. After a while, I slipped away from the bustle and found a side lounge that overlooked the garden. It was quieter there, the sound of the party muted by thick walls, rows of novels, mostly decorative, lined mahogany shelves. A single lamp cast a soft glow near a set of plush chairs, and the flicker of the fireplace reflected off a gilded mirror. I rested my glass on a side table and let the tension drain from my shoulders. The years of estrangement felt heavier in this house. It was as though every piece of furniture or wallpaper pattern tugged at old wounds, taunting me with glimpses of what used to be. Voices drifted in from the hall, hushed but urgent. I peeked around the doorway and saw Trevor kneeling beside a small console table, rummaging for something, maybe a charger for his phone. Wes, one of Rosalie's corporate connections, approached him, and Trevor tried to hand over the phone for an urgent call. "The battery is dead," Trevor apologized, frowning at the device. "Here, let's try my mother-in-law's phone." He reached into June's clutch, which was inexplicably left on the table. He unlocked her phone to dial, but then froze. I watched him blink, scroll, and tilt his head in confusion. "What on earth?" he murmured, turning to the other man. "She has a contact labeled spam caller. Do not answer, manipulative. But the phone number belongs to someone local." The other man let out an awkward laugh. "Could be an ex-hairdresser? Who knows?" But Trevor's face told me he wasn't so sure. His brow furrowed, and he glanced around as if trying to find an anchor for the sudden suspicion blossoming in his mind. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A quiet understanding passed between us. He'd stumbled on the first real piece of evidence that my mother had intentionally shut me out for years, even labeling my number spam caller. I said nothing. I took a sip of my sparkling water, letting the quiet burn of citrus keep me rooted in the present. Trevor's expression shifted from confusion to a flicker of horror. He looked back down at the phone and then up at me again, silent questions brimming behind his eyes. By the time he tried to say something, the announcer's voice filled the main hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We'd like to invite everyone to join us in the front lounge for a special presentation in honor of Rosalie Price." The background music lowered, and the gentle hum of conversation shifted toward the designated area. In the hush of that transitional moment, Trevor quietly tucked the phone away and followed the crowd, but his posture was stiff, like a man who had just stumbled on a puzzle piece that didn't fit the bigger picture he'd been sold. Like moths to a flame, everyone gathered in the front lounge. The overhead lights dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated Rosalie in the center of the room. The applause was immediate and warm, tinged with genuine adoration from guests who believed she deserved every accolade. She wore a sleek lavender gown, shimmering under the chandelier. Her dark hair, pinned in an elegant twist, revealed the slender curve of her neck. There was no denying that Rosalie had a commanding presence, that she knew how to perform for a crowd. Patrick and June positioned themselves just to her right, beaming proudly. I lingered near the back, half in shadow, where I could watch without drawing attention. "Thank you all for being here," Rosalie began, her voice resonant and practiced. "This is a special night for me, not just because it's my birthday, but because I finally get to share a project that's close to my heart. Synapse Care." She lifted a small handheld clicker and advanced a slideshow on a large monitor. Bold text flashed, "Synapse Care, real-time neural monitoring and compassionate recovery." My stomach nodded. The name had changed, but the concept was identical to a project I once referred to as Synapsis, a blueprint for bridging real-time neural data analysis with patient-friendly care solutions. I had spent countless nights refining the system, only to have that research stolen and credited to Rosalie. When I first began exploring how to merge neural mapping with emotional analytics, she continued, glancing around the room, I knew it would be an uphill battle, but I believed in the potential to change countless lives, so I persisted. Her sincerity would have been convincing to anyone who didn't know better. I noticed at least half a dozen older doctors nodding in admiration. My father's chest puffed out with pride. My mother dabbed at an imaginary tear in the corner of her eye. I felt a quake of anger deep in my bones. She wasn't just taking credit for a concept. She was plagiarizing entire phrases I'd once used in a white paper. I recognized the rhetoric, practically word for word. Through the hush, I heard the faint murmur of doubt. Didn't someone named Laurel Price? No, Laurel something? Publish a preliminary version of this tech? A tall woman in a crisp navy suit asked her colleague. The man shrugged, uncertain. Rosalie seemed to detect the ripple of whispers. Her gaze darted nervously toward the back of the room, toward me. She quickly clicked to the next slide, a more general diagram that might stifle any further comparisons to my published papers. But the damage was done. Trevor's eyes found mine from the side. He looked stricken, realization dawning that his wife might have built her career on theft. I said nothing. I let the cracks appear on their own. When she finished speaking, the applause was polite but less enthusiastic than it had been minutes before. Rosalie lowered her gaze, perhaps sensing the subtle shift in the room's energy. The formality of the presentation ended. The background music returned, the lights rose, and people began chatting again in small clusters. Rather than linger, I slipped out through the French doors leading to the back patio, where a slight chill in the evening air hit me like a splash of cold water to the face. The garden stretched out under strings of warm lights, highlighting carefully curated flower beds and hedges. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old willow tree by the koi pond, where I saw two silhouetted figures. It was Noah Miller, my dear friend and business partner, and standing beside him, my 10-year-old son, Zachary. Zach had never set foot on this property before. We talked about it a few times in abstract, me explaining that it was my childhood home, now belonging to people who pretended I didn't exist. I had never planned to bring him here tonight. It felt too raw. But the moment I decided to attend, Noah insisted that he and Zachary would come after all the official dinner speeches just to support me. When Zach spotted me, he broke away from Noah and ran across the patio, sneakers squeaking on the damp stone tiles. "Mom, we're here." He hurtled into my arms, nearly knocking me off balance with his enthusiasm. I held him tight, inhaling the scent of his shampoo, feeling the little bones of his shoulders as he hugged me. "You're late," I teased, smoothing his hair, "but I'm glad you came." Noah ambled up, hands in his pockets, offering me a reassuring smile. He was the steady presence in my life, the one who helped me build a legitimate company from the bare scraps of my stolen technology. "We didn't want to disturb the big reveal," Noah said quietly, nodding toward the house. I managed a bitter laugh. "You might have actually improved it, but at least now people are asking questions." Zach, oblivious to the tension, pointed to the glass doors leading back into the main lounge. "Mom, is that my aunt?" He peered in at Rosalie, who had resumed mingling, trying to salvage the night's momentum. It struck me then that he had never met his aunt or grandparents, except through the few photos I'd shown him, photos that no longer existed in the public face of this family. "Yes," I said gently. "That's Rosalie?" Trevor's voice floated out from behind us. "Your aunt is amazing," he said kindly to Zach, though his tone was strained. "So is your mom." Zach's eyes lit up, oblivious to the undertones. "My mom taught me about neural sensors. She said she invented them when she was in college." And there it was, a child's plain, innocent truth, carving through layers of adult denial and politeness. Trevor's face went pale. He glanced at me, clearly recalling the phone label, spam caller, and the suspicious familiarity of my work in Rosalie's presentation. From the open door, a pair of guests overheard Zach's statement. One was an older man in a gray suit. He blinked, then commented to his companion, "But Rosalie always said she developed her prototypes during her residency. She also told me she had no siblings." A hush followed, like oxygen being sucked from the air. I felt the silent stares of half a dozen people nearby. None of them had known I existed until now. I placed a steady hand on Zach's shoulder. "Come on," I murmured. "Let's go inside for a moment." Noah remained by the patio railing, out of the direct line of fire, but he offered me a supportive nod. Together, we re-entered the house. Behind us, the night sky pressed in, like a living thing that had witnessed our entire exchange. Barely had we set foot in the corridor when my father, Patrick, appeared as if from thin air. He blocked my path, voice low with a simmering anger that felt all too familiar. "You just had to show up uninvited," he spat. "Why? To sabotage your sister's moment?" I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Sabotage? I'm here because Trevor invited me, and because you and Mother decided over a decade ago that I wasn't part of this family anymore." Noah eased Zach aside, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. My father's glare flickered toward my son, then back to me. "All you've done is cause pain. Remember how you stormed out?" "Stormed out?" I repeated, my voice still steady but taut. "You locked the door, Dad. I wasn't the one who stormed away. I had nowhere to go. Let's not revise history." He leaned in, eyes blazing. "Keep it down. This is Rosalie's night." "It's always Rosalie's night," I said, frustration edging my tone. "What about everything that was taken from me? My tuition fund, my research, my name in the industry? None of that matters?" He made a show of exhaling, as if I were being hysterical. We helped you. You had no direction, no plan. You couldn't finish your college program. That money would have been wasted. My hands balled into fists. I had scholarships lined up, Dad. I had professors who believed in me. You pulled that funding and gave it to Rosalie without a single explanation. You orchestrated a narrative to make it look like I was incompetent, and then you locked me out of the house. He refused to back down. We did what we had to. Rosalie was focused, determined. You were lost. Zach, listening from a few steps away, lifted his gaze to me. He didn't speak, but his wide, dark eyes mirrored confusion and concern. Slowly, gently, I guided him toward Noah, who nodded in understanding and led him quietly into an adjoining parlor. Now it was just me and Patrick, father and daughter, face to face in a corridor that smelled of polished wood and lilies. The hush of the party beyond the walls felt oppressive. You can't hide the truth forever, I said softly. Eventually it catches up. His shoulders tensed, and for a moment he looked almost panicked, like a man whose carefully built castle was crumbling. Then he set his jaw. If you won't leave on your own, I'll have security escort you out. I tilted my head, a sad smile on my lips. You always did underestimate me, Dad. I left him standing there, fists clenched at his sides. I felt his eyes burning into my back, but I refused to look over my shoulder. 15 minutes later, I found myself near the fireplace in one of the lavishly decorated sitting rooms. In front of me was an old mahogany table, and on that table I placed a slender manila folder. The room had grown quiet. News traveled fast in such circles. A cluster of guests lingered by the far wall, sipping wine but clearly listening. June and Patrick approached, with Rosalie trailing, a swirl of anxiety in her eyes. Trevor stood a few steps behind Rosalie, arms folded, scanning the scene. My mother opened her mouth first, but I raised a hand to halt her. You want to keep rewriting history? I said. Fine. Let's lay out some facts. From the envelope, I withdrew several papers. The first, dated August 2012, was an official letter from Northridge University, confirming my disenrollment due to incomplete tuition payment. I placed it on the table. My college was told I wouldn't be returning, I said, voice calm. Funny thing, I never authorized that withdrawal. Next, a bank statement from the same month, showing the transfer of funds from my educational trust to Rosalie's new account. I laid it out so everyone could see, including Trevor, who stepped forward to read more clearly. This is the entire balance of my college fund, I stated, pressing a finger to the relevant line item. Transferred on August 17th, the day before the fall semester fees were due. And guess who authorized it, Dad? Your signature is right there. Patrick's face reddened. My mother avoided my gaze, pressing her lips into a taut line. Rosalie looked from the papers to me, eyes glimmering with panic. Is this some kind of trick? Rosalie asked, voice trembling. Because I didn't know. Don't lie, I cut in, turning my head sharply. You knew exactly where your sudden influx of money came from. You never asked questions because you benefited from it. You just slapped your name on technology that I developed. Rosalie's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I did work hard. I improved the designs. I'm sure you did, but you never credited me for the foundation. Trevor finished reading the documents, then slowly turned to look at Rosalie. His voice was quiet but resonant with betrayal. You told me Laurel left school voluntarily, that she had a mental breakdown and refused help. No one spoke. From the corners of my eyes, I sensed the guests inching closer, curious but hesitant, like onlookers at the scene of a slow-moving accident. I continued. For the past 11 years, you've all insisted I ran away, because I couldn't handle the pressure. Meanwhile, you labeled my phone number as spam caller, so you could ignore my messages. You locked me out of the house, out of my potential career, out of my own family. And all the while, you financed Rosalie's education and lauded her as the next big innovator. Then I lifted a smaller document, an excerpt of my original patent application from 2016, which preceded Rosalie's claims. Recognize this language, Rosalie? It's the same text you used in your slideshow tonight. A murmur of shock rippled through the onlookers. Even those who'd come to this party purely to network and drink seemed caught up in the drama unfolding. Rosalie was the first to break the silence, though her voice came out shaky. You think you can just ruin me?" She looked around at the stunned faces of her colleagues, potential investors, and family friends. "I did the work. I turned your half-finished theories into a viable product. You disappeared." "You took my ability to stay," I retorted. "You and this family forced me out. You could have included me, collaborated. But instead, you shut every door. You needed me silent so you could claim the spotlight." Trevor's face contorted, a mix of guilt and fury. He turned toward my parents. "Is all of this true?" he asked, holding up the documents. June's attempt at composure cracked. We were trying to keep the family stable," she stammered. "Laurel had always been rebellious, and Rosalie she needed—" "You could have told the truth," I interjected. "That I was the older sister who laid the groundwork for an invention that might save lives. That you pulled the rug out from under me to give Rosalie an advantage." Patrick let out a bitter laugh, though it sounded forced. "We had no idea you'd become so vindictive, Laurel. You should have come to us if you needed help." I tried. Again and again, I shot back, struggling to keep my voice from rising. "You didn't return my calls. You had me blacklisted from potential scholarships. Every time I tried to speak, you slammed the door." A swirling tension filled the room. The stares from those around us were no longer passive. Some wore expressions of horror or pity. Others looked downright angry, as if they too had been duped. Suddenly, Trevor stepped in front of Rosalie. He took off his wedding ring and placed it in her palm with a resigned air. "You told me you were an only child, that your sister left you and your parents in the lurch. Everything was a lie. How do you think we can move forward from that?" Rosalie's eyes brimmed with tears. "Trevor, please, don't—" He shook his head, stepping back. "I can't be part of this anymore." By then, the confrontation had drawn an audience that included staff, doctors, neighbors, and distant family friends. Whispers spread in every corner. The crescendo of them felt like a tidal wave about to crash. In that moment, I realized I didn't need or want a dramatic finale. No triumphant monologue, no savage takedown. The truth was out, and that was enough. Noah, standing near the threshold with Zach, caught my eye and gave a small nod. He understood that my fight was finished. I took one final look around. The grand architecture, the expensive art on the walls, the brand of luxury that had once been my daily environment. It all felt foreign now, like a stage set on which I'd never auditioned to perform. Rosalie made a half-hearted attempt to reach for me as I walked by, her voice cracking. "Laurel, please, let's talk. I was just trying to survive too." I paused only for a second. "We all survive somehow," I said softly, "but not all of us do it by erasing someone else." Then I walked past her, past my mother with her shell-shocked expression, past my father's clenched jaw. The crowd parted without protest. The hush was profound, broken only by the rustle of dresses and the shuffle of shoes on polished marble. Trevor murmured an apology to me, but I shook my head, offering no response. Not then. That conversation would be for another day, if ever. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. The lanterns along the porch and walkway glowed softly. I caught a glimpse of my father, Patrick, hovering in the shadows near one of the pillars. Perhaps he couldn't bear to watch everything unravel from inside. Maybe a part of him knew this was the end of their carefully crafted facade. He glared at me as I descended the stairs with Noah and Zach. "You think this makes you some sort of hero?" he hissed, just loud enough for me to hear. Noah didn't even break stride. He spoke calmly without turning around. "She doesn't need to be a hero. She just needed the truth to come out." And with that, we left. No one rushed after us. No one tried to stop us. Life has a way of moving forward, even after the largest revelations. 2 weeks post-party, I sat in my modest but comfortable home office, early afternoon light spilling through the windows and onto the scattered notes and open laptop on my desk. My focus wasn't on the chaos that had erupted at the birthday gala. Rather, I was finalizing something deeply personal and important. The Price Foundation Scholarship, a full-ride program for STEM students who lacked the family support or resources to continue their education, was about to launch. The name was partly ironic, of course, but it was also my way of repurposing the legacy and money that had once been denied to me. "Take from the past to build the future," I murmured to myself, reviewing the final digital documents. Noah's voice drifted in from the hallway. "Hey, is everything good?" "Yeah," I called back. "I'm signing off on the scholarship details right now." It took another few minutes to confirm the last items, cross-check the bank details, and do the e-signature. Then I clicked submit. A wave of relief and quiet triumph washed over me. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. My gaze landed on a small note card that lay off to the side, its edges crisp. It had arrived that morning in a plain envelope, no return address. I recognized Rosalie's handwriting on the front. To Laurel. Inside, a message scrawled in shaky letters. "I never meant to destroy you. I thought you were strong enough to bounce back from anything. I needed to be the best, and I didn't know how else. I'm sorry." No request for forgiveness, no direct admission of guilt, but a kind of acknowledgement that she understood what she had done. I slid the card into a bottom drawer labeled Old Family Business and closed it. On my phone, a missed call from an unknown number, another voicemail from my mother, probably more excuses or deflection. I hit delete without listening. I wasn't seething with anger anymore. It was more of a quiet resolve, a knowledge that I didn't need their acceptance or apology. I had found my own path, built my own success, and created my own family with the people who stood by me when I needed them most. Later that afternoon, I wandered into the backyard where Zach was happily digging small holes in the garden bed, trying to transplant some seedlings. The autumn sun slanted across his messy brown hair. "What are you planting?" I asked, crouching beside him. "Not sure," he admitted, showing me a packet with bright flowers on the cover, but they looked cool at the store. I smiled, remembering how, as a kid, I used to rummage through my mother's gardening tools without permission. That pastime had earned me more than a few scoldings. "Some plants do better in certain soils," I said, "and some plants really don't like being next to particular others. They choke each other out." Zach frowned thoughtfully. "Sort of like people?" "Exactly," I said, brushing the dirt off my jeans. "Sometimes you have to move away from what's toxic or overshadowing you so you can grow on your own." He nodded, brow creased in concentration as he tucked a seedling into the hole he'd made. "I guess that's why we don't visit Grandma and Grandpa, right?" I paused, feeling a pang in my chest. "Yes, buddy. They're they're figuring things out. But it's not our job to wait around until they do." He patted the soil and looked up with a hopeful smile. "We have a better garden here anyway." I ruffled his hair, laughing softly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Behind us, Noah stepped through the sliding glass door, holding 2 iced lemonades. "Ready for a break?" "We have cookies too." Zach's eyes lit up and he bounded toward the kitchen. I lingered, staring at the patch of freshly turned earth. In time, flowers would bloom there, no doubt. Later that evening, once Zach was asleep, I settled in front of my desk to record a brief video blog for my small, but growing, online community. This was something new I'd been doing, sharing personal stories of overcoming adversity, aimed at anyone who might feel trapped in toxic family dynamics or professional sabotage. I stared into the camera, heart beating a little faster than usual. Then I began. "Hi there. My name is Laurel Price. Some of you know bits and pieces of my story. Tonight I want to share something a bit raw and personal. 11 years ago, I was locked out of my own family. They told everyone I was the one who left, that I just disappeared. But the reality was very different. I was a college student, dreaming of new ways to integrate real-time neural analysis with patient care. I never got to finish that dream in the academic world because my tuition mysteriously vanished, and when I questioned it, my family cut ties." I paused, letting that sink in for any listener. Just recently, I went back. I showed up at a birthday event that I wasn't supposed to attend. I saw my old house, my old bedroom walls from the outside, and I confronted the people who tried to pretend I'd never existed. Why? Because they needed to see me stand, alive and well, after years of trying to erase me. Because it was time they understood that no matter how hard they pushed me down, I would rise. The memory of Rosalie's stunned face flashed through my mind, and I felt a twinge of sadness for what could have been if she'd chosen honesty over jealousy. "Here's what I learned," I continued, voice softer. "Family should love you without conditions. But sometimes that's not how it goes. And it's not your fault when people can't open their hearts to your worth. It's also not your responsibility to stay silent in order to preserve their comfort. If you've been through something like this, if you've ever had to step away from your own parents or siblings to feel sane and safe, then you understand how painful it is. But you also understand the power of reclaiming your voice. My throat tightened, remembering each humiliating night I spent sleeping on a friend's couch, scrambling for tuition money, rewriting code in a coffee shop at 2 a.m. because that was my only free time after work. I don't share this to shame anyone, I said, but to remind you and myself that we're not defined by who cuts us out of their lives. We can define ourselves by the actions we take, by the love we give and receive in honest relationships, by the future we build from the ashes of the old. I inhaled deeply, determined to maintain composure. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? Did their silence, or your own, feel like it would break you? Or maybe you stayed and found a different resolution. Whatever your story, I'd love to know. Drop a 1 in the comments if you relate to any part of this. And if you feel comfortable, share your city or country. Tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this shared experience really goes, because you might be surprised to find you're not alone. I offered a small, warm smile to the camera, even though there was a pang in my chest. And if this resonates, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I'll be posting more real stories, some raw truths, and hopefully a bit of healing in the process. I paused, closing my eyes briefly. Then I looked directly at the lens. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If no one told you today, your story matters. You matter. You don't have to let anyone rob you of your voice. You can reclaim it, rebuild it, and yes, even offer a little grace along the way. Not for them, but for yourself. I clicked the red button to stop recording, exhaling in the sudden quiet. My heart still hammered, but it felt like I'd set down a boulder I'd been carrying. The next morning, I woke early, a sense of lightness in my body. Noah was already making coffee, the aroma drifting through the kitchen. Zach was in the living room, humming to himself while drawing a cartoon version of me fighting off some imaginary dragons with a neural scanner. "Hey, buddy, that's really cool," I said, ruffling his hair as I passed. He grinned proudly. "It's how I imagine your invention works, zapping brain monsters." I laughed, a real, unguarded laugh, the kind that feels like a sunrise inside your chest. A pretty good metaphor for emotional baggage. When I reached the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A short note. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry. T. Trevor." I felt a flicker of empathy for him. He'd believed Rosalie's stories and was now left unraveling an entire marriage built on a lie. I sent back a single reply. "I'm sorry too. Wishing you peace." I might never see him again, or maybe we'd cross paths. Either way, I'd chosen to let go of the anger. The rest of the day was mine to do with as I pleased, spending time with Zach, refining some new code for an upcoming product, and finalizing details for the scholarship's official launch. I realized that for the first time in 11 years, I was living without the shadow of that painful betrayal constantly looming. Sure, my parents and Rosalie still existed in their own corners of the world. Maybe they'd embark on some damage control, or perhaps they'd do introspection. Either way, it was no longer my burden. Outside, a light rain began to fall, pattering on the roof and windows, making the garden glisten. Zach jumped up from his drawing and ran to the back door, watching droplets gather on the sunflowers he'd planted. Even in the rain, those bright petals stood tall, testament to resilience. I joined him by the window, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your flowers are doing great," I commented. He nodded. "They're strong," he said, "even when it storms." That simple statement from the perspective of a child tugged at something deep inside me, as if he'd voiced the message I needed to hear all those years. Sometimes, the most crucial truth is also the simplest. Life doesn't need permission to bloom. It'll grow in the cracks of sidewalks, through adversity, in secret gardens. Given enough light, water, and time, it will flourish despite anything or anyone trying to stunt it. And that, I realized, was what I had become. So, if you're reading or listening to this retelling of my journey, I'll ask you the same questions I posed to my video community. Have you ever had to walk away from your own family to protect your sense of self? Does staying silent actually keep a family together? Or does the truth, however painful, pave the way for real relationships? If this story resonated with you, if you felt that tug in your heart saying, "I've been there," let me know. Drop a comment, a simple one, or share where in the world you are as you read this, because chances are there are many more of us who've walked the same path than we ever imagined. And if it didn't speak to you, if you're lucky enough not to have faced betrayal or erasure from those you love, tell me why. What does family mean to you? Let's have that conversation. Above all, I invite you to remember one thing: your voice matters. No one has the right to steal it from you, even if they're the people who gave you life. Sometimes the hardest but most necessary step is standing up, quietly, firmly, and saying, "No more." On that note, if you'd like more stories like this, raw and real, gleaned from the messy heart of actual experience, please subscribe and turn on your notifications. Because as I keep sharing, I hope you'll find pieces of yourself in these words and realize you're not alone. This isn't just storytelling, it's healing. For me, for you, for anyone who needs to be reminded that no matter how thoroughly someone tries to erase you, you can still reclaim your narrative. And that is the most important story you'll ever tell.